should have taken an espresso before this. I saw the other presentation. They were so excited.
And we're live on YouTube.
All right, we have about 2 minutes till Swigo will launch at 1:30. Yep, 1:30. And then at 1:30, I would wait maybe about 30 seconds, let everyone get into the session, and then you can go ahead and get started.
Thank you. If if the wind was on me, I'd have my hair blown back. And I have a little fan here. Have fun.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to just wait a few minute or two to let people get in. Thank you for being here. You do not have to put your name in the chat. Your attendance is automatically taken for CTLE.
Good afternoon, everyone. We'll get started very shortly.
And just in addition to the chat, we also have the Q&A function open. So for any questions, you can go ahead and put them in the Q&A section. We still have
Yeah,
people coming in, so we're just going to hold off.
and if you can't, if you we don't touch or cover your question during this, we will ensure that we follow up. We'll download the full history of the chat, and we'll make sure that we follow up personally with everyone here.
And we'll also be sharing our contact information so you can reach out to us directly. All right, William, should we go ahead?
Let's do this.
Okay.
So good afternoon, educators. We're pleased to have you at this forum, Accessibility Supports for Accessible Schools and Schools in New York City. So really excited to have you all here. and we're excited to get started. Some basic housekeeping. We're trying to keep the chat clear. So definitely trying to get as many questions as possible within the chat and be able to answer them. Lastly, just as an introduction, my name is William Herrera. I'm the Director of Accessibility for the Office of Accessibility Planning in New York City Schools. And Susan?
My name is Susan Keok. I'm with the Special Education Office, and I'm the Director of Access and Accessibility. And I'll get more into what that means and how I can support you and your schools.
Perfect. And then here, just listing the honorable mentions of our teams. So I also have here Sheila Galicia, Jerry Chang, and Daniel Asoli, who will be, you might see them in the chat answering some chats because they are logged on, but I did want to give you the extended team that can support with accessibility resources. So we'll start. So I'm from the Office of Accessibility Planning, which our office is charged with ensuring that New York City Public Schools programs, services, and activities are accessible to all students, family, staff, and other members of the school community without regards to actual or perceived disability. And Susan?
And as I said earlier, I'm with the Special Education Office, where we work to provide a free, appropriate public education and full educational opportunities in the least restrictive environment to New York City public school students with disabilities.
To give you a little overview on what the Office of Accessibility Planning specifically covers. So we cover capital planning. You might have seen us, or maybe one of your buildings is impacted by one of our construction projects that's ongoing right now. We've been charged with over the last 5 years of supporting New York City's public schools effort of make of ensuring our buildings are more accessible using 750 million of capital dollars to make our school buildings more accessible. So you might be in one of these buildings, or soon will be in one of these buildings getting an accessibility upgrade. So one of our major jobs here is we look at the capital scopes, we look at these jobs, we follow these jobs, and more to come. You will definitely see us across the city in one of these jobs. We also are charged with conducting and creating building accessibility profiles for each one of your accessible buildings. So we'll get more into that, but you should definitely be able to see your accessibility profile if you log in, if you are within a partially or not accessible building. Next, the Office of Accessibility Planning supports reasonable accommodations. So we support with requests that we get from the community about reasonable accommodations. We also support student requests for reasonable accommodations. We also support the uh, uh, um, we also support staff accommodations by doing individual meetings with staff members after they've gone through the after they've gone through the Office of Disability Accommodations and they're approved. We sometimes do one-on-one meetings with these staff members to see how we could support with accessibility resources. And then lastly, what we're doing here is accessibility awareness and explaining what supports we're able to provide in New York City schools. So just to give a quick brief overview, the Americans with Disabilities Act discriminates against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including jobs, schools, transportation, all public and private places open to the public. The ADA defines a person with a disability as a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So we just wanted to start off with this definition, and we'll go further into it. To provide right now, this is an older statistic, but within New York City, there's approximately 1 million people living with the disability. And we just wanted to share this so it shows that I forget where we are, over 10 million in New York City, but the amount of people with disabilities living within our communities, and how having an inclusive lens really will support us in planning, future planning, meeting planning, but having an inclusive lens, it might not be our student body, but it could be members of the community coming to our buildings, could be parents, and anybody from our community. So more to come on that. So the school building's accessibility right now is cut up in two large accessibility designations, as we call them. The full accessibility, which are buildings that are rated a 9 and 10 with our building accessibility profile score. So just to back up there, the Office of Accessibility Planning has surveyed to date over 900 buildings, and there's over 900 building accessibility profiles available online on the School Finder. So those buildings with the 9 and 10 BAP, all their areas are all their primary function areas within the building that serve education are accessible. A partially accessible building, those are buildings rated of a 1 through an 8 on our accessibility rating system. These buildings may have some barriers for individuals to access. So it's really good if it's just good edification if you want to, you should know your building accessibility profile score of your building. And it really helps you know. So what does the BAP do? The BAP points out to the accessible entrances, how to access, what are the accessible transports to get to your building, what is the accessible areas within your building, where are there accessible bathrooms, what public assembly spaces and resources are available to a person with a disability, is there a stage lift, assistive listening system. So the building accessibility profile does this. And then just lastly, to let you know, so the full team here at OAP, we are consistently weekly doing more building accessibility profiles and even going back to ones that we've done early on. This really started in 2017. So we are consistently evaluating our school buildings. So any accessibility project, any project that occurs that would support the accessibility of the building, we'll often come shortly thereafter to survey the building. Susan, feel free.
Sure. And we will talk about what those designations of partially and fully accessible mean for our students, particularly when it comes to admissions. And I'm also going to talk about what a physical accessibility need means. Again, this is important when it comes to the admissions process. So for the admissions process, a physical accessibility need is a physical condition that makes it impossible or very difficult to stand, walk, and or use stairs. So some students with physical accessibility needs are students who use mobility devices such as wheelchairs, walkers, or other devices, and that may be full-time or part-time. Excuse me, I am having terrible allergies. I'm sure I'm not alone. It's also students who require extra time and assistance. You may have seen students who have paras who carry their backpacks so they don't have to have that extra weight on them. And I always like to point out that some of our students who have physical accessibility needs that affect or will affect in the future their ability to use stairs. So we want to keep that in mind when we're planning. And also that some health conditions are not visible. So we have students who have heart conditions or they may have lung conditions, and they do require an accessible building. And some students with physical disabilities may have an IEP, they may have a 504 plan, or they might have neither of those. But all of the students are eligible for the accessible admissions priority, which I will talk about in a minute. Can you go to the next slide, William? Thank you. So enrollment for students with physical accessibilities needs. So as William talked about, we have fully and partially accessible buildings. And he's going to show you where to find those building accessibility profiles. Excuse me. And I use those building accessibility profiles on a daily basis. And I also want to say that our schools that are partially accessible are really great options for a lot of our students with physical accessibility needs. So please don't rule those out when you're helping students through the admissions process. So the accessible admissions priorities started in the 2019 school year, so the 2018 admission cycle. And the priority looks different for different matriculation points. So it's going to look different at kindergarten, sixth grade, and ninth grade. And the full policy is available on the public facing New York City Public Schools website. But in general, whatever priority a student is in, if they have a documented permanent physical accessibility need, they will go to the top of that priority list. So we'll use middle school for an example. If a student gets a lottery number that puts them in priority group 2, they stay in priority group 2, but for every partially and fully accessible building they put on their list, they go to the top of the students in priority 2. So I help students, families, and schools with admissions for students with physical accessibility needs. During the admissions process, when we have families who move within New York City or move to New York City from another area, or when we have students who are newly diagnosed with a physical accessibility need. So you can contact me, which we are going to send out these slides, by the way. And I also have an inbox, accessible admissions at schools.nyc.gov. And I'm happy to work directly with families or with school counselors, with APs, whoever at your school is taking care of this. I'm always here as a resource. Thank you, William. Can you go to the next slide?
Yeah. So I'll take over from there, but just highlighting, Susan and me work very, very closely. She helps out the whole enrollment area of accessibility. So if you ever need support, you guys are all now being introduced to Susan for any accessibility need. And then on the other end, me and Susan are daily speaking together because I work on all the accessibility resources within these buildings. So that's how we kind of complement each other. Sorry for just giving that explanation there at the end. So just to give you and to follow up, so the building accessibility profiles, right now there's over 800, like I was discussing earlier. What they do in these profiles is they explain the path of travel to the entrance. What is the accessible means to access your building? What is accessible within your corridor and lobby? Is there anything that a person with a visual disability should be concerned about? Is there projecting items? Those things are all brought up in the building accessibility profile. Where are the lifts, elevators, and ramps in your building? What is the current state of them? Are they steep? Are they degrading? That would all be pointed out in our building accessibility profile. What educational spaces are accessible? What is the public assembly and recreational areas? Fire safety, where are the holding rooms? Is there climate control in this building? Are there strobe lights on this building? Where are the accessible restrooms? This is all highlighted in those building accessibility profiles. And if when you do, as building leaders or within your school, just look at these profiles and you may have a question, feel free to reach out to us and we have no problem explaining. Even if you see or you may think that maybe the survey was done back in 2017 and you would like us to conduct a new survey because there was some major addition that we didn't highlight, you can also reach out to us about that. And then the last one is the real reason, another big reason why we do these building accessibility profiles is it shows us where we need to improve within our buildings. So what we do with these building accessibility profiles is we have all this internally database within our office of where we need to remediate areas to make buildings more accessible. So that's that's the truth in the sauce, as they say. That's how we know how to make our buildings more accessible and what we're currently working on. And how to find the BAPs. So all you would have to do is go into School Finder, type in your school name or building name, and then when you go into it, you'll be able to find your building. You'll see there in the overview section, you'll see fully accessible. But then all you have to do is click over to the toggle and click the reports. It will be the first section there will go through all the building accessibility profiles. So all the buildings assigned with the org you're looking to will be written out there. So that's a quick way to get to your building accessibility profiles.
And I just want to add that the building accessibility profiles can be shared with the public and the community, with families. It is a resource for them. And as William mentioned, one of the handiest pieces of information on there is the closest accessible subway and also the bus route to get there. So that's something when families are in the admissions process, that is really helpful for them to know. And as William mentioned, the NYCPS is working really hard and getting a lot of money to bring schools on board as either fully accessible or going from like a 1 out of 8 to an 8 out of 8 in accessibility. So that might be improving the accessibility of the bathrooms. We see that in a lot of schools where the entrance is accessible, the classrooms are all accessible, the auditorium is accessible, but the bathrooms aren't. So there are schools that will be welcoming students with physical accessibility needs for the very first time in their history. And that is another area in, where I can support. So if you're finding out now that you'll be welcoming a student for the first time with a physical accessibility need, I just want to share some best practices. Get in touch with the student and the family, and also the students sending school. And if you can, I know there's only like 12 days of school left, but if you can participate in the IEP, that's great. Or get in touch with the staff at the sending school and find out what the best practices are and how you can best support the student. If the student does have a paraprofessional, determine how that person will be hired and trained. You can reach out to your PT and OT, your related service providers, on transfer training. If the student has a Section 504 plan, arrange to get a copy from the sending school and coordinate with the family to see if anything needs to be updated or changed. Again, I know it's late, but if you can visit, that's always great, but a phone call or a Teams meeting works too. And I also want to talk about using inclusive language. Some of you may have attended the earlier session today about the Inclusive and Interdependent Language Initiative Glossary that was created by 2 NYCPS graduates, which is really exciting. And if Jerry, if you could drop that tiny URL in the chat that leads to that glossary, that would be great. Or if you can drop it in the chat. Thank you so much. So we use person first language a lot of times. So instead of saying something like, I'd still hear this. And it pains me to say it, like the special ed kids or the wheelchair kids, they're students who use wheelchairs, or they're students who have IEPs. That's just a more respectful way to honor the person first. There are, but like language is constantly evolving, and there are groups that have decided that that their disability is a large part of their identity. For example, the autistic community, also the deaf community, they do prefer to be called, autistic and deaf. And, when in doubt, ask. Another point I like to bring up is to use age-appropriate verbal and body language. This is especially important when we are with our older students who are non-speaking and who use a wheelchair. They're still 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, so some people will have a tendency to talk to them because they can't speak back, but they still communicate non-verbally, and some of them may use devices. So, please just keep that in mind. I know it doesn't come from a bad place, but we just have to be aware of that. And Yeah, we already talked about the glossary. It's such a great resource. I can think of ways you can use that in a staff meeting with your students, as just a way to raise awareness. And then finally, William mentioned using an inclusive lens when you're planning school activities. I cannot stress this enough, and especially when you are planning field trips. Um, if the student if your students who use wheelchairs, other mobility devices, or who cannot walk for long periods of time, um, and you need an accessible OPT bus, you still need to follow the guidelines for the field trip. So you have to ask for that bus with enough leave time and, follow the guidelines put out by OPT. Same thing with, walking trips, that kind of thing, decide how you are going to plan to be sure that everyone is included. I'm happy to be a thought partner with you if I can help. William, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, just if you have any trouble with this or receiving an accessible bus or anything that you would like to have us highlight, feel free to add accessibility at schools. My team will be directly invested in supporting you with any of this planning. So I just wanted to highlight that, and I'm just like, I know I'm screaming it from the rooftops, but if you need anything for us to push that message across to ensure that you have an accessible bus, feel free to include our team. Okay.
Yeah, and you can also email me. All right, next slide, please.
I'm not going to spend very much time. It was just a follow-up to what Susan said before on the do's and don'ts. I'm not going to go into full detail, but it's people with disabilities rather than the other two terms listed there. And I really like the don't. I was in actually a nice citywide, no, not a citywide, a school training where we had a nice video we were able to show about just don't assume, it's best to ask, and I fully understand that it's not coming from a bad place, but definitely something that we want to continue to get updated within New York City public schools, to all be using the same language, to not hear this even from our custodial engineers, our different areas in our building, to really hear it citywide. And just to let you know, me and team all do CE training citywide, so we're working at all levels to change the way that we approach disability. Susan.
Sure. So before we know it, it'll be time, and I'm sure a lot of you are already planning your open houses for the fall of 2024. And when you leave our session, you'll all go find your building accessibility profiles, and you will know if you are a fully or partially accessible school. So, if you are a fully or partially accessible school, I strongly encourage you, in however you do your registrations, RSVPs, have a section where you ask, do you need any accommodation? Um, and if your accessible entrance is not the main entrance, have a plan on how you're going to man that accessible entrance, because even if someone doesn't RSVP, you may have someone who uses a wheelchair or walking aid or needs that accessible entrance come to that entrance. So, you can use an adult and some student helpers, or, you can get really creative, but have a plan. Also review the program. There are students who need to be with an adult for medical reasons. Think about our students who have either one-to-one paras or one-to-one skilled nursing. So, there have been some awkward reports, that we get where they split up the parents and the students, and I understand wanting to do that and giving the kids a little bit of independence, but that might not be the best choice, because it just might be an awkward situation for that singles out a student with a medical necessity to be with an adult. Have someone who knows your building accessibility profile well, can answer questions, and who is prepared to assist students and their families getting around the building, again, if the main group is using the stairs and another group has to use the elevator, make sure that you know how they're going to meet back up, because we've also gotten feedback that families have been lost. They don't know how to find the group. We again, I know this doesn't come from a place, of malice, but we just really don't want that stuff happening. And then you also would want to invite those families back for a personalized tour, where they can ensure that, the bathroom meets their needs. They might need something. This is again where William and I work together, like grab bars installed, or a stall widened, or something like that. Like little adjustments. We cannot put in an elevator in 6 months. Sorry. But there are small, reasonable accommodations that we can do. Next slide, please. And we changed the IEP. I want to say it was 2018, but I just wanted to review this for all the IEP writers out there. In the present levels of performance, under physical development, this is where we get our data. That goes to the student profile in CSIS and also to the summary page. So under the physical development, you want to describe the student's accessibility needs and their current supports. And that also needs to go under management needs. So you would write in here, the student requires an accessible building, and the student requires extra time between classes, or whatever it is. And then you will answer the question, does the student need an accessible building? And that's a required question. And when you hover over it, a little box pops up and it defines what an accessible building is. So you answer appropriately yes or no, and then it will ask, does the student have limited mobility, yes or no? And then it asks, does the student use a walking aid? And once you finalize the IEP, you can't see this anymore, these questions, but like I said, it does go into the summary page and the CSIS student profile. This is the information we share with the Office of Student Enrollment. So it's really important that this is accurate. So thank you for letting me review this, even though it's been around for a few years. I appreciate it. So considerations for students with physical accessibility needs in preparation for the first day of school. So again, if the accessible entrance is not the main entrance, if the student is being bused, confirm your process on how the student will enter the school. When I was an AP, we had a student who used a wheelchair. Our main entrance was not accessible. So that student had not only his para's phone number, but he also had my phone number and two other teachers' cell phones, and he would call when he was 2 blocks away. That's not going to work for a kindergartner. So, you're going to have to get creative. This email is Williams team's email, accessibility@schools.nyc.gov. So if your accessible entrance does not have a doorbell, camera, or if you need wayfinding signage, if you're in a big school or even a little school and you need that signage that indicates where the accessible entrance is, please reach out to William. Do a dry run of the schedule to identify barriers. Like we used to keep a 50-gallon trash can in the middle of the hall. If you have a student using a wheelchair, that's really not a great idea. Make sure you have an elevator key or fob for that student if they need it. Make sure, again, I'm harping on the accessible restrooms. I mean, by now you should know they exist, but make sure that they work for that student. And then when it gets to student-specific equipment, assistive technology, hygiene support, also like standers, gait trainers, make sure that that is in place for the first day of school. And William and I can also help you with that. You can email me, you can email accessibility, you can email both of us, and we can work with the
Office of
school
School Health.
facilities. I forget what the D stands for. Yeah. And we can actually get that equipment moved with enough lead time I've been in this position since 2018, and I have learned that parents and our related service providers and teachers are doing that moving. And thank you all. You're wonderful. And thanks to the parents, but we can help and take that burden off you and have professional movers do that. Same goes for ESY, Chapter 683.
Yeah.
So please reach out to us for that.
Yeah, definitely use our whole teams for that. That we have no problem doing any of the moving for you. No need for you guys to put this in your personal vehicles. We'll send trucking. So definitely keep us as a FYI for anything that needs to be moved, any equipment. Back to you, Susan. Sorry.
I know there were some great instructional and assistive technology presentations earlier. So real quickly, you walk into a classroom and one student is writing an essay on an iPad with predictive text. That's assistive technology because that is probably on that student's IEP. And assistive technology is technology designed specifically to assist people with disabilities. You walk into another classroom and every student is using an iPad with predictive text. That's instructional technology that's available to everyone. So if you are welcoming a student who uses assistive tech, if you need training, if you're not familiar with the assistive technology, you can reach out to the Center for Assistive Technology team or the CAT team at this email, catteam@schools.nyc.gov, to arrange training for your team in September. You can also ask them if the equipment can go home over the summer or if you should store it at your school. Contact the family to make sure that, especially for speech generating devices and communication devices, you want to make sure that it's always charged. So does it get charged at home? Do you keep it at school and charge it at school? You just want to have the system and you want to keep those lines of communication open. Okay, next slide, William.
Mhm.
Thank you. And for our students who are blind or have low vision, there are different types of visual disabilities. There's low vision or blindness. There's also albinism or photophobia, which is sensitivity to bright light. And then there's cortical visual impairment, which is vision loss due to damage to the cortical nerve. So depending on what level it is, the students will have they'll see shades. I'm no expert, but they'll see shades, but there are different phases and students can actually move through the phases in their lifetime. So if you have a student who has educational vision services on their IEP and a vision teacher has not contacted you, please reach out to info@edvisionservices.org and they will support you in getting the teacher out there. And that's just really the message on this slide. And yes, we will be Jerry and Sheila, if you could put, they're putting the link to the slides in the chat right now. So special considerations for students who are deaf or hard of hearing. You want to consider the learning environment, work with the student on what is best for them, on where to sit. If they have any sort of assistive listening devices, be aware of feedback. If they have a pass around mic, you want to be sure that as the teacher, of course, that you're using it, but when the students are having a discussion, you want to make sure the students are also using that microphone so the student doesn't miss out on the classroom conversation. You want to ensure that the flashing emergency signal for evacuation is working. And you also, particularly for our younger students, want to make sure that they know how to react to that alarm. So when you're doing drills, you want to do an extra check on students who are deaf or hard of hearing. If you need assistive listening systems, sign language interpretation for events, contact accessibility, that is William and his team. I mean, he's going to talk a little bit more about that. And again, if you need any support, you can call the supervisor on duty at 917-256-4224 and have the student's name and OSIS ready. And that's the best way to get support. Thanks, William.
Yeah, and
Over to you.
I'm gonna bring this home because we're short on time. It's just me and Susan love talking about this, and
We
we
do.
keep going, and we want to support all of our educators in our schools. So that's why it's more out of love that we like to do this work, and we want to really support you. So we did take a little longer on the slides before, so I'm gonna fly through some of these. But if you guys have any additional questions, feel free. Accessibility at schools. We're banging that home today and really saying you could definitely reach out and our full teams will be able to help you. So just giving you a quick so our team supported creating an accessible entrance guideline a few years back. This was sent out to the Division of School Facilities and done in tandem with the Division of School Facilities, Office of School Foods, and Office of School Safety. Pardon if I'm saying that wrong now. And what we did is we created practices for individuals when they access our buildings. One of the biggest ones that I'm just going to say about this is the safer access door systems. When they're in the middle of getting implemented and installed, they should always be at your main entrance and your designated accessible entrance. My team has worked with the Division of School Facilities to call out those accessible entrances. So I'm hoping that we do better in having doorbells and intercoms at our accessible entrances citywide because of this program. If you do see that that's not occurring at your building, feel free just to send us an email at accessibility at schools, and I will get in touch with the contractors and figure out why this is not occurring. Okay. So last one is just awareness. Know where your accessible entrance is, but you could see that in your building accessibility profile. This is just going through the safer access system and just sharing with everyone. There's a couple things that have been done to support accessibility connection to this doorbell intercom system. Something that you will start to see in the next few weeks is there's instructions for Braille going along with the other instructions within them. You'll start to see that being installed this summer. Also, when the security agent connects, the front area, the top black area will light up. Like I think it's blue, that show that someone's connected to you after you ring the doorbell. And then once the door is actually unlocked, it will turn green and show you that you could open up the door at that point. I know individual schools are doing programs and trainings on this, and there's a lot more communication going on. I think citywide there'll be more trainings for that, but definitely you'll start to see at least the Braille instructions and more of this coming your way. Next one is, and I saw there was a question today in the chat about what happens if I have a temporary disability in a school. This is similar. So our team helps out whenever there's vertical transportation or an elevator that goes offline, and we will be sending actually an email to your building leaders to let them know, hey, the elevator is not coming back and it's not scheduled to come back online for the next 2-3 weeks. We need to work on creating a contingency plan on the ground floor so that students receive education. This is similar if we have a temporary disability and a student needs access. You could also reach out to our team to support. If it's not you want to move the classrooms to the ground floor where there's access, but if that's not possible, we'll work with each school on a plan to get a plan in place so that student still receives instruction. So feel free to reach out to us either if you have an elevator that's persistently out and just want to flag that additionally to us, or have a student with a temporary disability. Next one is that public meeting guidelines need to have reasonable accommodation information when it's going out to the public. So any event that you're doing in an accessible building, you need to include reasonable accommodation contact information. How do parents or members of the community ask for an accommodation? That must be listed out. So if you need support providing any of these reasonable accommodations, you could feel free to use our team to support you with this. If you would need real-time captioning, the sign language team to come out and do interpretation services, we can do that. If we need to provide an assisted listening system, if we need to provide a temporary ramp, feel free to reach out to our team and we'll help you out. Things to consider when hosting an accessible event. Think about what areas are accessible within your building. Be mindful when scheduling. Like once again, ask, is that area accessible in the building? Is there accessible restrooms nearby? How would someone need to go to the accessible restroom? Would it be on a whole other floor? What is the means of getting there? I really think the best one for this whole slide is use your inclusive lens, think inclusive. This is just an example of the mayor's office for people with disabilities. Right here, having an RSVP and the proper language that we should have for individuals requesting reasonable accommodations. If anyone has any questions or would like for the proper guidance on these documents, feel free to reach out to us. We'll share that with everyone. And we'll also try to host that up on our intranet, so more individuals have access to it. Our office is also, like we said before, if you have reasonable accommodations, your team, your school can reach out to us for ramps, bathroom upgrades, sign language interpreters, braille transcription, moving a program. We've had that in the past where there was a graduation in a non-accessible space. So our team went out there and worked with the school and admin to find where we moved that program into a more accessible space. So it's not what we love to do, but we definitely can get it done. Reasonable accommodations. Everyone now has a link to these slides. I'll keep putting more links after this, but you could contact accessibility at schools. We also have our direct phone number there to my full team here. One of us you will hit with 718-935-3393. And then accommodations for employees, just to highlight this because I didn't really get it at the time. It goes through the Office of Disability Accommodations. It's oda@schools.nyc.gov. And it's really called the SOLIS portal and SOLIS application process for staff members to do reasonable accommodations. So it'd be a little bit different if it's a student, a member of the community, or member of the community. Those should come to Office of Accessibility Planning. But if it's a staff member, please go to ODA. And regardless, in the end, you'll still be talking to us at the end once you get approved. So this is the contact information. I know I flew through the last slides to bring it home. This is the contact information for our teams. Obviously, me and Susan are listed at the bottom. But as you can see, our extended teams are here. Jerry is one of our coordinators for Queens. Sheila helps us with Manhattan and the Bronx. Staten Island is myself. And Daniel Soli is Brooklyn. So that's all we have, but I just want to leave you with, please fill out this feedback form before you guys log off. It really helps us to know what we need to do better on for the next trainings. So this is really appreciated for everyone, and feel free once again to reach out to us at Accessibility at Schools, and we hope to answer any of your questions. Susan, anything you would like to leave on or end on?
Yeah, I would like to add, I know you talked about it, so I would say the link to the slides is also in the Q&A under Sheila Galicia. We don't have an agenda, Joan, sorry. We didn't make an agenda. But we do have the slides. So if you don't want to go through the chat, which I understand, because there's a lot in there, and sorry if you had a question in there. We do have a few more minutes if you want to put a question. I do see a question that is about a staff member accommodation. Like William said, that's what the Office of Disability Accommodation. This session is about students, supporting students. So I don't work with staffs at all, staff
But
accommodations at all.
feel free to reach out to ODA. You could also include accessibilities. We work with them daily, so you could always use us, and we'll get you into the right place. So Just
Yeah.
that's a major resource, so you know.
And multiple people did ask about, I know you touched upon it, William, about students who have
Temporary disabilities.
temporary disabilities. Oh, Sheila, could you put the link to the feedback form in the chat or
Mhm.
and in the Q&A too, please? Thank you.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
it really is a student by student situation. So please reach out to both William and myself, and we will work with you because it depends on the student, it depends on the injury, it depends on what your building is like, you know, but we've come up with all kinds of solutions, including ones that involve technology.
So,
So,
Susan, we're getting the cut.
okay.
But thank you everyone for
Thank you,
joining, and
everyone.
we really appreciate it.